I would like to, in our midst today, we have some guests in Parliament. I'd like you to welcome, we have from the Middle Heights Christian Prep, we have 20 students and 2 teachers. We'd like to welcome them to Parliament, as well as from St. Catherine High. There are 46 students and 4 teachers. So, welcome to Parliament. All right, members, are there any apologies for absence? We have here Mr. Heroy Clark and Mrs. Juliet Holness. Are there any other? No other apologies. All right, members, I move to item number 5. I'd like to move for the confirmation of the minutes of the meetings held firstly on January the 23rd. That was a meeting with the tertiary institution, read the delisting of students, UTEC and UE. Could I have somebody, if there are any corrections? If no corrections, can somebody move for confirmation? And seconded by Member Jackson. And similarly, on March 26th, we had the second supplementary, am I correct? Third supplementary. Estimates. Any corrections? No one move for confirmation? Can a member move for confirmation, please, Phillips, and seconded by Member Dalrymple. Okay, members, I want to move to item number 6, and I want us to, it is the provisional schedule for the committee. Members have a copy of the proposed schedule. I'd like to make some amendments or suggestions. This week we have the Ministry of Labor will be discussing the issue of security guards. Next week, we will have the Ministry of Finance, Bank of Jamaica, and PIOJ as normal. We start the financial year to have a discussion with them about the budget.
24.
That's the 24th. And these are proposed because, as we know, sometimes they overlap. On week 3, which would be the 1st, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and the Office of the Prime Minister, a number of agencies that overlap: Caribbean Maritime University, the Heart Trust NTA, and Jamaica Foundation for Lifelong Learning, have been invited based on questions that were asked at the last meeting. So, sure.
Since there are matters in that ministry that are under investigation, you know, the queries are being raised and things are being done. And since this morning we only have just a few of us here, might I ask that we defer that to a little later to allow things to take its normal course in the view of what's happening? And because we don't have, I notice you have Mrs. Holness not here and Heroy not here, and some of your members are not here. And it's something that is quite topical now. I would suggest, open to your opinion, that we hold that for a little further down to allow.
Member Jackson.
Chairman, I respectfully defer with my colleague. It is not unusual. The matters that they are investigating, if it is the case of the Auditor General's, for example, it's a matter that the PAC deals with for auditing transactional financial transaction. Our remit is for administrative supervision of the agency. So in the case, for example, MOCA is still at Petrojam, and the PAC is still conducting their review of the Auditor General report on it. So there's a plethora of examples that not just currently but historically too, that will inform that it wouldn't intervene. In the respect that the colleagues who are here, they'll come next time when the meetings are being held. So their absence from now would not differ with the schedule that I see here before us. And this is a schedule that we were circulated on before. So I presume that if there was some major inconvenience, that would have been conveyed to the committee, as was the case, for example, in PAC, where we would have met this week. But Member Warmington indicated that all the government members have a pre-set event that they would seek our cooperation with not scheduling for. So I really don't believe if one or two members happen to be absent, it should deter the work of the committee.
I take the point that Member Jackson said, and I agree with him. He is correct that although investigations, are taking place, there is a lot of precedent. So I take that point. But since as a member myself, I'm sometimes not here unavoidably, and you don't, I really think that, and since we have a custom, I agree with him that we can go on and the business must go on because, as you say, Petrojam, MOCA is there, but we still have questions. But I do believe when you look at our numbers this morning, I would think in a matter like this, we really could, I'm saying could, not should, could, in deference to all of us, and I say so because I have been absent some time, unavoidably because something has turned up, allow for a decision to be taken where there are more members present. That's my point.
I've listened to both sides. What I would say here is, with regard to Ministry of Education here, these were specific questions asked which are not in the remit of what we understand the general investigation is. And I think that it's important for us, especially as we have found some issues already in the Ministry of Education, that we must continue our role of oversight over the wider picture. So where these specific questions, this is not this week 3, the 1st of May, what we're doing here is questions that were asked. The ministry has not been asked to putting its report, and we're going to dissect the report in a broad way. This is a specific questions that were asked by members. So I'm inclined to take that in week 3. The one thing that I would say, Member Dalrymple, is that many of us, as you said, we're here, and we can't hold off the deliberations until everybody is present, because if that was the case, you may never reach a decision on any issue because of who does not turn up. So I think what we can do, if any concerns arise as we move forward, I think what we're doing is some preliminary discussions as to what. And as I said, so Ministry of Education. Now, week 4, we have here Council of Community Colleges, Tertiary Education, etc. Members, in lieu of what was just said, the question is whether or not we would take a continuation of the Ministry of Education here, or move what is on week 4. What's the members we have these specific questions on week 3 with the Ministry of Education, but I notice here some general questions on education. I just want to get a indication from the committee whether or not we will take education in week 4, because we're not, these are specific questions. It was not. So it's a question as whether we should or should not. Member Dalrymple, are you suggesting that we do not take week 4 on education here?
That would be my
initial.
I understand clearly what is being said, but that is how I feel without.
And members, for week 4?
I wouldn't want to break the trend. I think that we could continue since we're on education. We'll get out the educational issues out of the way.
It won't get out of the way just so easily. Should tell you that.
I think so, member that the Ministry of Education will not get out the way very easily at all. It will be there for a very long time.
So I'm saying, therefore, that is my point, and I don't want us to have a quarrel about it. I'm just saying that there needs to be no grand haste to move forward. But I'm not quarreling. I take your point.
All right. For week 5 on the agenda, we have now, members, what we do understand is that even though we put week 5, this now becomes sort of a preliminary, because if a previous deliberations take longer, it's going to push it back. So rather than have the week, I think it's more important the sequence. It is indicated here that we would take the Ministry of Labor in a fulsome way after we finish this discussion with education, and then we would take the Ministry of Local Government.
I'm a little bit not so clear here. Week 2 is fine. I'm clear what we're going to be doing next week. In week 3, I thought I heard you saying that given the issues that week 3 relates to the Ministry of Education, which is also on week 4.
Yeah.
If you're proposing to conjoin both sets since the ministry is that what you are proposing?
No, I'm not really proposing. I'm seeking guidance. I'm indicating that what I understand here, week 3 is not necessarily, it's not exactly Ministry of Education, because questions were asked of JFLL, Heart Trust, Caribbean Maritime, and Education, which are in different ministries.
Yeah.
So we were taking that as a more response to questions asked. Now, so that would be week 3. The question is, how do we proceed from there?
Because why I made the latter point is that, if you could just move it up and subsume week 3's activity with 4.
And take 4.
Yes. So you just pull it right up.
Okay. Because the same persons basically.
The same persons are going to be here. And there are more questions than substantive.
And then members, what I would suggest, rather than put week, let's just say that the agenda would be, we would take education, labor, and local government. When you break it out like this, I think when we get closer to it, let us do that, because some of the things that are written here will take longer than some, others will be shorter. But for example, week 6, what you have here is Abilities Foundation, Child Labor, Early Stimulation Program, Family Services, Jamaica Council. It may be that we take more or less. I think what we should do is take the ministry, and we will guide the deliberations based on the pace.
Sure. I would suggest, like, for those, can we get reports on these
early? Absolutely.
So then we determine if we bring them or not.
Which is exactly the point I'm making.
Yes.
So for the committee, what I'm saying is that after we finish those that we have discussed, we'll take the Ministry of Labor fulsomely, and then the Ministry of Local Government. And then during that process, we can have a meeting, at another meeting with more members, as Member Dalrymple, we can continue the discussion.
Chairman, may I just have a small, I'm concerned that how we frame the narrative seems to exclude our attempt to get answers in relation to the principal area of our remit. If I could just pick out we put a lot of focus, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't, on what has been described. Can we just go back to Provisionals. On page 46, inquiring into the administration of government to determine hindrances to efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for the improvement of public administration. There seems to be
the mic, please. No, it's on. No, turn back right. But you're.
I'm sorry.
You're focused.
Yeah, where the focus seems to be is on C, as set out in 73A, but we spend very little time looking at the budgetary expenditure for these agencies and to see whether or not it is done in accordance with what we have already approved, the whole body of the House. And really looking at, we seem to put a lot of focus on this, and so that where we should really benefit under A, I'm saying that I think we're falling down in that regard, and I think we should perhaps spend a little more time.
Well, let me just say this to you. Certainly in the first part of the budgetary cycle, less is spent at this point than further down. So there's less that we are able to, in other words, having just received the budget, many are not able to spend in the early part. But remember, I think that if that is a observation, then it falls to us as members. I'm saying once the ministries appear, it is for us to determine the tone of the deliberations and what information we want to extract. So I'm simply saying different persons may seek to ask different questions, and certainly it is each member has the ability to determine what they feel the priority should be.
And I have no difficulty, but it's been part of my little mantra, if you may so describe it. Inquiring into the administration of government to determine hindrances.
Again, Chair, if you allow me, member, because again, and which during the deliberations you tend to refer to that section. No. And again, when at this early stage, when you look at the previous financial year and look at some of the spending, look at the program of work that some ministries may come with in this financial year, you may pick up some of the hindrances that you speak about. And sometimes you refer, why are we going back into the previous financial year? But it is that fact that you may see a spending, and let me use an instance then, in the Ministry of Transport, you might have a spend in the Boscobel Aerodrome, and then you see a similar spend again. No, I'm just using it as an example. Coming again in this financial year, which you may pick up at the beginning of the financial year. So even though the spend may not start at the beginning of the financial year, but you may see a figure in that line item. You may pick up, you may be able to argue the point. Why is that spend in this financial year when you have not yet spent the full amount in the previous financial year?
Chairman, we can have an argument running for 2 weeks dealing with this particular point, and we've gone through this already, and we're back here.
And what I see us failing to do is to grab a hold of the particular our remit and to ask for clarification. We have not sought, nor have we obtained.
No, I'm just saying though, what specifically are you asking the clerk to do that's not being done at this point?
Have we sought clarification on the meaning and the application of Standing Order 73A as it relates to 77?
No, but I think with due respect, you're asking a committee to adjudicate on itself. I think this is something that should be dealt with the House.
Well, may I ask? May I ask in those circumstances if we, having come up on against this difficulty, if we've had the matter referred to the appropriate committee?
Well, remember, I think that you use the term "we" fairly broadly, but let me just say let me just say this. I do believe, though, that there has been some discussion about looking at the standing orders. I think the Standing Orders Committee, based on discussions that have taken place, just to formalize and ensure that a lot of what is now being done that the standing orders are specific to everything that is done, because in the past we have had this discussion over and over about the committees and how the committees operate, and I think that's something but that is for the Standing Orders Committee. I don't think that's for the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee.
Well, Chairman, can we at least admit then, if that's the road we're taking, that we do not have any rules which govern our operations?
We have had this, as I said.
No.
And the legal
Chairman,
officer.
I'm not being flippant. I want us to get to the point, because I hear it all being bandied about.
I'm still trying to understand, though. The point I'm making to you, you indicated something, and I take your point clearly. You said that there are three things that we look at, but that you would want us to pay more specific attention to A, which has to do with the actual monitoring of the budgetary allocation. And I simply said to you, I think we can all agree to it. What specifically would you ask the clerk to do that's not being done to achieve that goal?
Well, can we take an historical view then? What have we done in terms of examination of the provisions of, well, in relation to sections A and B under 73A, and look back at the reports that we have tendered to the Parliament and to see how much of that involves, because that part of the review of our own deliberations must tell us if we have been efficient, if we have been faithful to the provisions of 73A, A and B.
Chairman, with all due respect, I've said on many occasions that the member himself have the opportunity to bring it up at other occasions, on other places, and he keeps holding up the committee's work at other times.
All right, members, hold on.
Well, for my friend to take it, just to say that I'm holding up to examine yourself, to introspect, to look at yourself and to see whether or not you've been faithful to the rules.
All right.
Don't be rude,
no,
because
right.
I'm
members.
Yes, I think you are being, but to accuse me of not
members,
holding
please.
up the work of the committee, to look at yourself, to determine whether you're in compliance with the rules.
All right. Members, please. Member Daly, because I'm about members. I'm just giving warning.
Chairman.
Hold on, Member Daly, 1 second. Members, I'm just giving warning. We have the persons who have come for deliberations, and I'm about to invite them in. So please let us, Member Daly, you had indicated.
Chairman, just to remind myself that we came here before and have this kind of discussion and decided that we would have gone into a retreat to look and to see exactly, instead of coming before a full house with members, students up at the top, as if we don't understand what we are here about. I believe we need, if we have such concerns, we should go back to another retreat to get clarification instead of using this right here to do so.
But Member Daly, we did go in a retreat and have a discussion
That
about
is why I'm saying we need probably to go back in another one, because it is clear that there is some uncertainty of how we approach certain.
We'll take that under advisement. Thank you, Member Daly. All right, members.
Chairman,
Chairman,
it is not about retreating. I asked one simple question as to whether this committee had referred the issue to the appropriate body. My friend seems to think that I should raise it in the Parliament, but that is not, I think, the appropriate route. What have we done? And can we just answer that question as to what reference have we made? And can I see a copy of the reference?
No, member, I think, sorry, member, and I'm about to move on, Member Jackson, I'm about to move on, please.
Mr. Chairman, don't take my pleasant laughter to mean I'm demeaning the discussion at all, but my own recollection from the retreat is that we had settled on that matter with the clerk as to how we will proceed with it, and from then on, we have been conducting the business accordingly. So, and I think it is a settled, my colleague in another place would say in law, it's a settled matter in law. I think procedurally it has been a settled matter at the retreat, as my colleague from
members,
Eastern alluded to.
No, please. Members, I'm not inclined to proceed. I think we raise this discussion at least once every quarter, but let us, members, I would like, no, I'm not. Member Campbell. Members, please. I would like us just to we have an agenda. I would like us to approve the preliminary recommendations and invite the persons in, as indicated. Are there any concerns, or can we proceed as I think the last two that we had agreed to was to have the Ministry of Labour and then the Ministry of Local Government after we conclude the first ones. I will ask the clerk to put that out. Members, just to indicate, I will not be here next week. I'm going to, with your permission, I'll ask Member Phillips to chair the meetings.
Chairman, I'm delighted in the mood of my colleague.
To be a man, to be fair,
Mr. Chairman, I need a public apology from the member.
Member Campbell, you're under the impression you might be victimized. No, all right, members, please. All right, members, can we proceed, please? All right, members, with that, I'm going to ask that we invite the Ministry of Labour and the members from the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security to come, please.
So have you concluded Chair, you have concluded discussion on the schedule.
Yes. So what the first, what they want to do is to push this up into this.
Yeah.
I'm not, what them asked, we do. That's not 1, 2, 3, and then we will put, not week 5, we will then put Labour, local government. And then we take it from there, rather than.
Right, you said we get a massive report. And
because we don't, absolutely. And what time?
And then what, we go on to local government now,
yeah.
the parish councils.
Yeah, all that, everybody will be invited, and we decide. All right, members, let me welcome the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Ms. Colette Roberts-Risden, and her team from the ministry, and I think a little later we will give you the opportunity to introduce your team. And we have from the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security, Lieutenant Commander George Overton, who is the president, and his team, I think Mr. Mahfoud, but he will introduce more formally the positions and who is here with him. Members, the reason for this is one of the remits of this committee is for us to look at the efficiency of government and ensure that we are operating in proper manner. We received a letter on the 19th of March from the Society for Industrial Security, and without going through the entire letter, there were some things that were very of great concern, and we met 2-3 weeks ago and had a discussion and decided to invite them. Just to bring to attention of members, I recall, I think you have a copy of the letter, but just at the start it said it is with great concern. This is a letter signed by Mr. Overton that they bring to your attention the failure of various government agencies to ensure that security companies who are awarded contracts are compliant with the national minimum wage for security officers. It is of even greater concern that despite furnishing the pertinent information to the Minister of Labor, there has been no intervention, much less an acknowledgement. I have attached a copy of my letter to the Minister of Labor dated December 12, 2018, along with its attachments. And those attachments had a number of pay slips and other evidence indicating that security guards that were hired by contract through security companies by government of Jamaica were not compliant with the laws of Jamaica. Our committee, we would have to look at something like that and ensure that if by oversight this is happening, we need to put in place the safeguards to ensure that our security guards are properly protected. So with that, we have invited Lieutenant Colonel to come. What I'm going to suggest, members, is that we would ask the Society for Industrial Security to lay out what they see as their concerns and put it on the table. Once we have done that, I've asked the Ministry of Labor to give us a report, which we have here, members have. We can, 1 second, yes. We have a report of sorts. What I would ask them to do is to then respond. We could look at all the issues that we have, and based on that, we could then either ask for more information or make recommendations to Parliament as to how to proceed. So I say to members, if that is the
Chairman,
methodology.
I was not at the meeting that this matter brought us, so I'm a little behind there. But what I'm concerned about, just as I heard the complaints by Lieutenant Commander George Overton in terms of government not prepared, that is a serious matter that we have a duty to address. But you just said we have a report of some sorts. What I would like to find out from the PS before we even start, because so often when you have discussions and things get into public space, half of it is heard, half is not heard, and members of the public go off with the wrong impression. What I want to establish before we waste time and give the wrong thing is from the PS. Is her report complete? Is she in a position to answer in a fulsome way? Because it's a serious matter and it's something that needs to be addressed seriously. And in saying so, I want to be sure that once we start the discussion, that the PS is in a position to carry the discussion to where it needs to go. And why I say this is because very often after you leave this meeting and you hear the 12 o'clock news, you start discussing something. The media carries part of a response, part of a question, and the wrong impression gets filtered into the society, and then you spend another meeting trying to correct and go over, and sometimes it is not done. So I think before we do, because I think it's important and it's a serious matter, we need to ascertain from the PS, is she or her ministry, her agency, in a position at this point to really direct us in a fulsome way as to what the situation is?
Member, Madam Pierce, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. The report is incomplete. We received a letter just about 2 weeks ago from the PAAC, and this matter is an extensive issue which we are not complete. In short, our investigation and our research is not complete.
But Permanent Secretary, this letter indicates that this matter was referred to the Ministry of Labour from December of last year.
The specific of what was referred, we have information or answers to that letter. However, the committee asked us to look across the entire government of Jamaica. No, the government, there are lots of ministries, departments, and agencies, and they would have engaged quite a number of different security companies.
All right, so what you're saying is that there are two elements. One, there's an overall issue of whether or not the concerns raised do in fact have some validity. That's number one.
Right.
Number two is the extent of it. You going through every ministry, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right, so we should be able to go ahead with the basic principle of whether or not this issue does exist, even if we are not able to go into detail with every single ministry that it exists in.
Well, Chair, we can present our findings so far, but I would caution that our report may not have gone into the depth that the committee would expect or anticipate.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand when you say the depth with regard to particularly what?
Well, we looked, Chairman, at the companies that we have gotten. Well, we looked based on the information that we have gotten so far from the different ministries. We looked at the varying companies to date, and we're kind of going into my report, and I don't know if you want to go in. If I want.
Well,
Chairman, I with the greatest of respect, as I say, I'm behind time with this, and I wasn't here. But to me, what has been raised is important and very sensitive. And if it is very dangerous to pick from little things in a report, whether or not it exists in a real sense or not, depends on when the PS has completed her investigation and that she can say definitively, this is my finding. And we have precedents in here where people are not complete with the reports and we give them a little time. And in this matter, I am suggesting, because if the wrong thing filters out, it goes down, and sometimes you don't get a second chance to do it. I really think, and I hear the hesitancy in her voice, that she has done. And yes, it went in on the 18th of December, which was the Christmas season, and we are here now at April, and the report is being prepared, and the matter is being addressed. But if it is not fulsome, I don't think it is fair to them.
Member Phillips. Yeah, Member Lawrence,
Chair,
Member Jackson.
The letter that we received from Mr. Overton basically is highlighting that government is employing companies that are in breach of the minimum wage. And one, which is a core issue that he's asking us to look at.
So the start is it true or not?
So the question is that so or not? And the second part to that, how is it that the Ministry of Labour is dealing with issues like those? And I think that is the core of the matter that we're really looking at as a committee. Now, to drill down to the individual companies that may be in breach is that, for me right now, is a secondary, which is the investigation that the ministry is looking at, which there has been an incomplete report given by the ministry to us here. But I think as a committee chair is looking at how it is that we deal with that matter at hand on the non-compliance of those companies and how it is that government get into contract with companies that are not compliant with the laws of the land, basically. Yeah? And I think that is the meat of the matter where we need to, at least in the first instance, deal with it, and then we can deal with the second matter. If the PS said that she's not complete with her report on the second matter and would like more time, and I think we can give her more time and accommodate her.
Yes, Mr. Chair. My understanding of what the PS said in her opening comments is that she is still looking at the issue of whether or not it is across government that we have this problem, and therefore, in keeping with what Member Philip is saying, if she is not yet ready as it relates to determining whether or not this is happening across government, and this is my understanding of what the PS said, then we should.
Chairman,
we should.
I'm just going to ask my friend to you.
No, please. I'll add you to the list. Sorry.
Yes. So I think we should wait on the PS for a fulsome report as the accountable officer. And if she is not in a position to give full account, then I think we should wait until that is prepared and ready.
Member Daly.
Chairman, just reading from what the President alluded to in regards to security guards and company, I too have some concerns, and it is not being highlighted here. And I believe it is really something that we need to be very serious about, because this is also an indictment upon the government if we continue to allow anything of this nature to continue. And therefore, I believe that we need to look at this thing in a very fulsome way, in order that when we are getting our findings and when we are going to make our recommendations, we do so from the premise of knowledge.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No. Member Jackson, and then Member Campbell, then Member Terrell. Member Jackson, do you? I could.
Mr. Chairman, I seek your protection from my good colleague here. From where I am, Chairman, as I understood the letter we got and subsequent report, two issues: whether or not the security guards are being underpaid. That is one thing we need to establish, right? Which is a breach of the minimum wage. And the other issue is whether or not the government is complicit, right, in this breach by engaging the companies who are not abiding to the minimum wage provision. Those, for me, are the two core issues that we want to establish. the completeness of the list is not so much of great relevance here, right? Because if 10 are in breach, and if you read through I'm just getting a chance to peruse the report, if 2 or 3 are in breach, we have a problem, right? What the report will say when you complete the report is the full extent of it. But if 1 is in breach, 2 is in breach, 3 is in breach, that's too much. And our duty, in keeping with the profound concern of my member here from Northeast St. Catherine, we are to examine the government's operation, highlight where there are failures, and to make the necessary recommendation, which is what this examination this morning will afford us to do when it is complete.
Indeed. Well, I like the advocacy on my behalf.
And as unusual as it may be.
Indeed, sir. Chairman, if the PS is in a position to answer the allegations raised against the 2 entities which have been outlined.
Have you seen this?
No. What?
No, I'm just asking, have you seen this report?
Yes.
You have
Yes.
seen, but this has about 20 companies.
Chairman, the allegations as outlined in Lieutenant references 2 companies. And my question is the PS in a position to answer those allegations? If she is, then certainly we can proceed. If she's not, then the natural justice determines. It demands that we allow her some time to put herself in a position to answer those allegations. Otherwise, it makes a mockery of what here. So if we have a presentation from Lieutenant and he outlines all the things, and the PS is not in a position, then we are really at a non-starter. So let us answer that particular question as to whether she's in a position to answer.
That is my point. If the PS says she isn't, fine. If she is, fine. Let her say it.
Member Terrell.
Right, Mr. Chairman. No, I just wish to indicate that I listened to member Daly speak, and we're all in agreement that we want to ensure that there are proper systems in place to ensure that every single Jamaican is working under fair conditions, that salaries and all these things are regulated. We're talking about fair treatment. But for us to continue in this committee without a fulsome report, I think we do a lot of injustice and we cause a lot of speculations to be had about what is operating at this particular level, what is operating to make sure that the lives of security guards are better, to make sure that wages and time and hours and all those things are taken into place. What I've come to realize and what I have learned from being in this committee is that when we proceed with matters, especially when there are investigations taking place, when there are audits taking place, and we proceed in this committee, we tend to be we tend to look at the surface. We don't get at the meat of the matter. So the discussions tend to be very salacious. The discussions tend to be very, very sensational. And there's no certainty. There's no certainty of a way forward. There's no certainty as to what exactly prevails. So it is my opinion that if it is that the ministry has asked for time to complete their report, if they're already in train with investigations, then in fact it is in our best interest, it is in the nation's interest to await the outcome of that report, and as Member Daly said, so that we can have a fulsome discussion. Otherwise we find ourselves in a situation as with Petrojam, when we are discussing matters and we're calling in all different agencies and we're calling all different kind of persons, and we don't have a complete audit to properly guide us so we can ask the right questions and get the right information out. So I think we'd be operating at a lower level if we were to proceed in a clear case where the permanent secretary and others have indicated that we are in the process of doing a report. Let us complete the audit, let us complete investigations, you can get a proper dossier, and then you can ask us the questions. That is how we serve the people of Jamaica. That is how we serve the security guards to make sure that their lives are better.
Members, having heard the discussion, there are a few things that I would say. Number one, both Member Dalrymple and Member Phillips alluded to something which is, I think, at the crux of it. Permanent Secretary, in your preliminary investigations, have you found that these breaches exist or not?
Yes, Chairman.
So these breaches do exist?
The breaches in terms of the companies not paying the appropriate wages exist. To the extent, the second aspect of the question that was raised about the complicity of government, I am not in a position to speak any at all on that particular matter.
No, and members, and there is where I will agree with Permanent Secretary, because quite frankly, there's a system of putting out contracts and otherwise. So where there are breaches that exist with the law, it is our job as a committee now to make recommendations how we change the procedures to allow us to cover those breaches. It cannot be that we put them off. And quite frankly, members, if a letter was written to the Ministry of Labor in December of last year, and we asked for a report 3 weeks ago, and we're sitting here to put it off again. Member Campbell, please let me know. Member Campbell, please let me finish. But I'll make a point. When this letter came to Parliament from the society, in reading the letter, one of the things I did, and it follows what I think General Point made here, I did not call any names of any companies, because I don't think that us putting out individual data at this point is where we want to go until we have all the facts in. I didn't do it, and I said to members, it's not something that I would allow to be done. So even the report that we have, until we are able to get the fulsome report, I would not go into individual companies that are in breach and otherwise. All of that will come in its time. However, members, I do believe there are over 20,000 security guards. If we do not take this plight seriously, if we do not see that there are issues, we, as you said, may seem to be complicit. I think today what we need to do, given what Permanent Secretary has said, yes, those breaches do occur. The society has come out and indicated that they have concerns. They have gone public with it. They have written to government about it. I think without calling any members, I think the general principle of what they have said, I think it is incumbent on us to hear what they have to say. I think generally speaking, I will take the point, the extent to which the Permanent Secretary wants to respond, I'll give her latitude, but I agree with you. The important part of this discussion is not the fact that we have unearthed the problem. It's how we as a committee are going to recommend to Parliament that it be resolved and corrected. And I think the sooner we move towards that, the better.
Lest what I said came across wrongly, and it is what I think the Permanent Secretary has indicated. Yes, there are breaches. So are we prepared to leave this committee with, in response to the allegations which you have, to just say, yes, there is? What is it that once we move on from that point, the allegations are there and the response, yes. Can we now narrow our investigation to determine what it is? Because those persons must be named. And those persons, we must then subpoena those persons to come before this committee to explain why it is that they are in breach. Because this, for me, it's a civil matter. which ought to be taken before the Ministry of Labour and dealt with, and let us find out from the Ministry of Labour that it having determined that there are in fact breaches, what it has done to remedy those breaches. Because that's certainly not a matter for us to determine if you have breached those laws. And those matters are coming on an individual basis, and if have they been referred to the IDT? Those are issues which I am not sure that they come within our scope.
And on that point, I will agree with you. I think what we need to do today is to determine the general principles. I think the details of it can come at a later date, because my understanding, PS, is that the government is the largest employer, possibly, of security services in the country, single employer, if you put them together. Would I be correct? And therefore, government must set an example to the rest of the country. And it would take a while to get, as you can see, they have already started this process. I don't think we have to go into details, but it is important for us to determine the general principles of what we're dealing with. Member Jackson?
Mr. Chairman, I differ a bit with my good colleague here my colleague and good friend. Almost want to say good comrade too, but I contain myself there. And my brother. Mr. Chairman, this is not a tribunal to try each individual case. We have an oversight responsibility for the function of government, right? This is a case that has been brought to our attention that caused us to be here, where government, and a significant portion of government, is complicit in the minimum wage paid to security guards. It is complicit because we hire these companies. The government hire these companies in these myriad of government agencies, paying them large millions of dollars per month, and in the process paying the guards less than what the law requires them to pay. That is what makes us complicit as a government. Our responsibility now is, I have a couple questions, and I want the Ministry of Labour to advise me on this. And it relates to also the whole contracting process, procurement process. Where an employer is in breach of the minimum wage, what are the legal recourses, and whether or not, why hasn't the Ministry of Labour taken action against these companies who are in breach? The letter from the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security, in its letter to us, says that this has been brought to the attention of the Minister of Labour from December last year. This is April. It is an injury that the workers are suffering every day, and we don't know how long before this 12th of December that this was occurring. Why is it as we speak now this has not been remedied? That is where the government is in complicity with the oppression of these security guards. I want an answer from the Ministry of Labour on that one. Secondly, what provisions in the procurement procedure? Because all of these companies would have to have NCC certificate, the compliance. And I know from previous inquiry here, when the former contractor general was here, they carry out audits to make sure that these entities that are contracted to the government are in compliance with what government regulations are. For example, certificate of competence of their engineers or whatever the requirements are. There are a set of conditions that they must adhere to as contractors with the government. I want to know what sort of safeguard mechanisms there are for these contractors to make sure that they comply with the laws of the company, of the country. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, why this is of great significance. If the government can be indulging in this kind of action, right? We are setting an example for the other employers of these security guards. The employers of security guards in private entities. They can easily say if government are employing persons in breach, why they can't do it too. So we are not leading by example. Chairman. And it is, Mr. Chairman, why this is even urgent, you know. We are normalizing breaking the law.
Chairman,
on a point of order.
Chairman, can I say something, Chairman? This is exactly why I do not think we should have embarked on...
One second. Member Stewart, I have a point of order. I'm just going in. Yes, sorry.
This is exactly why I did not want the discussion to come in, because what is being carried in the press, when my colleague uses the word complicit, what he's saying to the public is that the government of Jamaica is involved with others in illegal activity. That is the meaning of the word complicit. And therefore, when that goes out into the press, people who have sense and know what it says to them, here is a government that is involved in an illegal activity. And that is why I said at the very beginning, the PS must be allowed to give a fulsome report where it can be gleaned whether or not what exactly is the status of the matter that has been complained of by the thing. And Chairman, I know I'm very correct, because what comes over the news is sensational. That is what people like. Is that here it is, the government of Jamaica is complicit. We are involved in illegal activities. That is not true, and it is not correct for us as a responsible committee to do it. I hold my point to that. I'm not going to go ahead with it.
I think, hold on. Member
and Campbell. I don't know how the PS.
No,
I'm
Member
not
Campbell.
sure.
Speaking to the issue of
the
security companies are doing, and not what the government is doing.
No, but the PS answered the question, and I'm not sure how she can. She says yes. She can say X or Y. I don't know how she can say that.
Have you seen a copy of the preliminary report? But then look at it, and you can see how she does it. Member, please, with due respect, we have a responsibility to the people of Jamaica. Member Dalrymple, we have a responsibility to deal with the issues as they appear. Members, please.
But Chairman, are we saying as a committee, this is what is, but that is what is being said, and that is what is going to be carried, that the government of Jamaica is complicit. We are involved with other persons in doing an illegal activity. That is what we are saying.
And Member Dalrymple. All right, members. As I said, I think this is occurring because in a lot of ways we're putting the cart before the horse. In this case, what has happened is that there are the society, which, and interestingly, it would be interesting to know the Society for Industrial Security. They have, I suspect, an oversight role with security guards and security services. They have made some complaints. I think, members, that it is incumbent on us to hear what they have to say without going into specifics on without specific cases. I think generally the right thing to do is to say to the Ministry of Labor the extent to which they can respond to the general principle would be number 2. And then after that, I think what we are going to have to do is look at what the extent of it is. All the information is not here, but we can get that at a later date, and then that can guide us as to how we would proceed with it. So, members, I would really, I think at this time, I think it's important for us. Member Stewart, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been quite patient. But I just want to find out from the Permanent Secretary with regard to the letter from the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security. Read these outrageous breaches that are taking place. Are they still taking place?
No, member, the point that's been made is until we get the fulsome report, we don't want to go into the specific details of the cases. What we need is a principle.
Course today.
On which course? Member Campbell, on which course do you refer?
What is it that we are going to take the allegations from, and
they have,
which is already given by the PS? We ask, so we have a situation where in the preliminaries you say there are these allegations, and the PS say yes, the two allegations which he has brought, yes, they're breaches. Yes. So what is there further to determine other than that there are two? So let us move straight move straight into the examination of the PS. No, yes, let us find out from the PS what it is where she went after having received those two allegations. What level of investigation she carried out to determine that there are those. So we can accept. Just put in the allegations from Commander Overton.
I think
the response to it is yes, there are these two breaches.
And let us know.
And let us find out from the PS, and we will go into the belly of the matter today with the PS. Since we are waving about report. Let us accept.
Yes.
Let us accept.
Yeah, but
those allegations which have been.
But we will accept with the courtesy of they're here. We will accept with the courtesy of having heard them. Member Paul,
Mr. Chairman, I'm entirely in agreement with you. I think having invited the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security here, it is only appropriate. It is only appropriate that we hear from them, and I'd like to hear from them. No, I'd like to hear from them. I'd like to hear from them.
I hear Member Paul.
Please, no, hold on. Members, please.
Chair.
We can have disagreements, but do it in an appropriate manner.
Chair, I think there are a couple of things that we can do from this committee, Chair. One, there would be a weakness in the procurement policy in how it is that government then deal with security companies, right? In how they approach the employment of security companies. But I would also want to find out what is the responsibility of the PSRA, which is a private security regulations authority. Because the report says that there are some that are not on the PSRA list. Yeah,
in effect, yes.
Right, because if it is a regulating body on behalf, because it is within the Ministry of National Security, the PSRA. So companies that are contracted by the government, do they have to be registered with the PSRA or not? Because if they are to be registered and they are employed by it, then that's another breach. Right? So I would like to know if that is a requirement.
All right.
But also, because if it is then in this instance that when government is contracting security companies
hold on. Member Dalrymple, please. Just a little lower. Thank you. Go ahead, Member Philip.
Contracting security companies, and all that is needed is a NCC and a TCC. Then there is a shortcoming then Chairman in the procurement policy, and I think that as a committee, then what then does what can then from the Ministry of Labour be done from their side? And our committee, the recommendations that we can make to support the Ministry of Labour and to support and to, because in this instance, you're going to have companies that are competitive and some that are not in pricing, and it's going to make the whole industry skewed
and these
in that
decisions
instances.
we take are going to have a
Exactly.
financial
So,
impact. So we need to,
I don't want to get into the meat of the matter, who is compliant from who is not. I would like to get, not at this point. Yeah?
Absolutely. Okay.
I leave that to the ministry to deal with them on that matter. If there are any breaches on that matter, for the ministry to deal with the individual companies. I want to see how it is that we can strengthen from the committee level the whole matter of the procurement, how it is that we deal with the breaches, what are the level of penalties that these companies, once identified, how we deal with them with these breaches. That is where I would like us to move and make these recommendations, taking them to the House and seeing how we then change the law.
all right. Lieutenant Commander Overton, welcome to the committee. Don't let, we have active debate in here, but I think we're all working towards ultimately the same goals. A number of questions have been asked. I think importantly, it would be important for us. You're representing the chair. You're the president of the Jamaica Society for the Industrial Security. It would be interesting for us to know what that is and its roles and functions, and also the roles and function of the private security regulatory authority. Is that right? Is that right? I think the second one. And then I would give you some time to sort of generally outline the concerns you had on behalf of the security guards. And I would ask you at this point not to be specific as to the names of companies at this point. Let us go through the process first, and then we can discuss it after. So welcome, and you may proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to thank yourself and the members of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee for inviting us here today. I am the president of the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security, and accompanying me today is Mr. Ricky Mafood, who is a director of the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security. The Jamaica Society for Industrial Security is a union of companies operating in the private security industry in Jamaica. Our mandate is to promote best practices and good order for the viability of the private security industry in Jamaica. Our members are companies that operate in the private security industry in the island of Jamaica. Although we are probably 28 companies in membership, we represent more than 60% of the guard force that is deployed across the industry in Jamaica. Our companies are registered with the Private Security Regulatory Authority as mandated by the Private Security Regulation Act. And we ensure that our members comply with all the relevant laws and practices of the industry. As it relates to the Private Security Regulatory Authority, their role is to regulate the industry, and by doing that, they ensure that the companies that are registered with the Private Security Regulatory Authority meet the requirements stipulated, which is a corporate body registered with the Registrar of Companies or an individual registered to trade as an entity. And from that, the company must meet certain criteria up to and including tax compliance and so on for registration. They also maintain a role of all companies working in the industry in Jamaica, all the officers of those companies registered in Jamaica, and those officers must meet certain criteria up to and including no criminal records. They also maintain a role of the types of services that each company provides. And also with that, they maintain a role of all guards that are licensed to the respective companies. and the categories. So if a company operates armed guards, canine handlers, close protection officers, unarmed guards, then each category each individual has to be licensed into one of those categories. The Private Security Regulatory Authority has that oversight, and we pay both company and individual license fees to the authority. Their only mandate is to look at that compliance and also training compliance. When complaints are made to the Private Security Regulatory Authority on breaches of minimum wage and so on, they have no authority over that. They have to refer it to the Ministry of Labor. I think that's it in a nutshell, Chairman.
Thank you. Just for the Private Security Regulation Authority, is that a private sector or government?
No, it is an agency under the Ministry of National Security.
All right, and it is chaired by, is it a person or?
It has a board. It has a board that's established, and it has an appointed executive director.
An executive director. And maybe it's unfair to ask you, we could do it to them at a later date, but in terms of compliance of the industry, do they have any role to play in ensuring sort of compliance with rules and regulations, or is it strictly administrative? Apart from being administrative, their compliance role is one that is limited to what is in the Private Security Regulatory Authority Act, which is training standards and licensing, really. Okay. All right. Yes.
No, the question that I ask, those who are contracted by government, are they required to be licensed by the PSRA?
No, but I don't think it's fair to ask.
No, well,
overturn that. You would like to go ahead?
One of the processes in the tender function is that a number of certifications or licenses are to be provided. All government tenders that I am aware of have a requirement for the company to provide their Private Security Regulatory Authority license, but that does not drill down further, nor is there anything that requires that all the officers who would be working for that company to be licensed.
No, and hence, Chair, because on the list here by the Minister.
No, let's not. Right. Let's take it one step at a time, member, please. All right. So, Lieutenant Colonel, could you give us the background of this letter that you sent to the committee?
Chairman, the society is extremely concerned about the viability of the private security industry in Jamaica. The industry, as was pointed out earlier, has in excess of 22,000 persons engaged directly in the delivery of security services. So if you add on the administrative and supporting staff around the delivery of that, we probably could be somewhere up into the 30,000 region of persons engaged in the private security industry. The industry today, in my opinion and my words, is in a race to the bottom. It is in a race to the bottom because we no longer are competing on quality. The purchasers of security are no longer purchasing on quality. It is all driven by price. And if you even look at the weightings that are given to the tender review process, a significant portion of the points which causes you to win the tender are on price. And therefore, companies who are in the market have used illegal means, creative means, unethical means to reduce their costs so that they can go to market with a much lower price. And the fact that the price is the driving factor, we are seeing an emergence of less recognized companies winning the majority of the big tenders and particularly government contracts. It is at a point that companies who want to behave ethically, companies that want to comply by the laws, are having to have second thoughts because everybody is seeing their businesses diminishing. We are seeing the viability of the industry disappearing despite the number of persons that are engaged in it. What is most disturbing to us at the Society, Chairman, members, is the fact that a lot of the quote-unquote cost-saving efforts are to the detriment of the guards, because it is coming from the denial of the legally published national minimum wage for security guards. And if we don't ensure that there is compliance across the industry, then the industry in itself is going to continue in this race to the bottom. So it is out of concern for the workers in the security industry and out of concern for the viability of the private security industry that we have brought this complaint so far, because traditionally we have written to the ministry and what happens, happens. But I don't believe that we can sit by any longer and allow whatever happens to happen, because it means that there will be no private security industry in the near future. And it's coming at a time where we hear the government talking about partnerships and alliances to incorporate the private security industry into the national security infrastructure. So it is important that we stabilize and ensure that there is ethical and compliant conduct within the private security industry. Sir.
Just for the record, you indicated here that a number of the guards were being shortchanged. Let's put it that way. What you're saying is it's not with respect to the actual payment of the salary, but there are other areas that are cut. In your estimation and your investigations, what are the areas that you find the problem? Where do you find the problem to exist? And secondly, what's the impact of it on the security guard himself?
Chair, what we have found through our investigations is that there are companies that will be compliant on the actual wage, but they are not compliant in the allowances. And that is at the mild infraction. So we have companies that will cap the laundry allowance, which is supposed to be paid for every hour worked. They will cap the laundry allowance at 80 hours for the officer over a fortnight period who may have worked 114 or 115 hours. So there is a shortfall in that payment. But on the extreme end of it, we have found companies operating that pay absolutely no allowances. In that case, the security officer is being denied, he is being short paid up to $175,000 a year. This is a minimum wage worker that you are denying $175,000 a year. We have also found that there are companies that are out there operating, and they call their security officers all kinds of things: security specialists, watchmen. Now, the Private Security Regulatory Authority Act is very specific in defining who a security officer is. And therefore, whether you want to call him specialist, doctor, whatever, as long as he carries out that function, he is a security guard and must be paid under the minimum wage as such. We found a company that calls them security specialists and is paying them a watchman rate. Now, the only industry in Jamaica that is allowed to use the term watchman is the construction industry. And under the Master Builders Agreement, there is a category of worker called watchman, and there's a rate that is prescribed for the watchman. So when you have a watchman on a hotel, that don't work. You have a watchman at a government-owned school, that don't work. And these are things that need to be brought up and regularized in the industry.
Member Stewart.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you to Lieutenant Overton. Your deliberations, sir, was quite frightening when you spoke of unethical and illegal means of getting in, setting up a company. But what is the role of the regulatory body? Should not there be set standards before licenses are granted for these persons to be carrying out these special duties across our country? That certainly would be one of the things that we would expect from a regulatory body. But unfortunately, like most other agencies, underfunded, under-resourced, and therefore not capable of fulfilling their mandate. There was a period not too long ago that the Private Security Regulatory Authority did not even have an inspectorate.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, as I listen to Mr. Overton's comments, it underscores the urgency of dealing with this matter of contract workers. Because as I inquired with my colleague beside me a moment ago, this over 21,000 set of workers in Jamaica, because of the categorization or classification as contract workers, they have no union. They have nobody to speak for them. And that's why this matter is even more urgent for us as a parliament, because we, the parliamentarians, are the representatives of these people. And for that reason, I believe, Mr. Chairman, one of the recommendations coming from this committee must be for the urgent steps to be taken to change that legal provisions so that we can provide meaningful protection for that number of our Jamaican workers. 21,000 workers is not just 21,000 individuals. It's 21,000 families that are being affected by these occurrences. And this is only but one aspect. The rates being charged, being paid to them. So, Mr. Speaker, my colleague from Northeast St. Catherine would agree with me that we do not wait on the regular cycle of reporting on this matter, but we do it with great dispatch after the completion of these meetings and have the matter debated in the Parliament and ensure that actions be taken in protection of it. But I'll invite him to join in support of that effort, Mr. Chairman.
Member Jackson, I know you would invite him, but I would like to invite Member Dalrymple first.
I thank you so
and
I
then
thank you
Member
so
Campbell.
much, Chairman. I listened to what the Lieutenant Commander said, and Lieutenant Commander said, and it is interesting that he says this has been happening for a little while, but now we're dropping to an all-time low because the private security industry is disappearing. What I am concerned about is, he says this has been happening for quite a time. Has it been brought to the ministry's attention? PS has said she can answer. There are these things. I want to know, when has it been brought? What investigations has been done? And how is it, what actions have been taken to push us forward? Which is the very reason why I started my proposal by saying I didn't think it was fair to put her in a position, albeit a sensitive and a very important, unless she is appraised of the facts and knows what is happening. So having said, and I had no doubt, as I said to my colleague, that I had no problems with the report that is before us, and I have no doubt that there's every ounce of truth in it. What I'm concerned now to find out from PS is, having said that, yes, you have found certain things, what investigations have you done that have brought you to the conclusion to be able to say in an affirmative, this is a position, and what is it that we have been doing today? Because that was my concern, that you would be forced to answer these questions without having been put in that position.
Okay, thank you, Member Dalrymple. Member Campbell, you had something you specifically wanted to say?
Yes. Commander, your body, you say, represents 60% of the industrial security guards, and that should take us in the region of about 12,000, 13,000. Right. And your members are, for the better part, compliant.
We are members of companies. It's a membership of companies. And the companies that are members of the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security have in their engagement roughly 60% of the industry, which is, you are correct, 13,000 officers.
Right. And for the better part, all your members are compliant with the rules. They pay the minimum wage, they pay all the...
It is something that we monitor and we ensure, and we have actually, yes, we do, and we have actually had to ask members to leave.
All right,
because of
non-compliance. As it stands today, are you all compliant?
Yes, we are.
All right. So I take it then that given that you are in the majority, you have a greater percentage of these guys, that the industry is in as good a shape as it can be, given that you are compliant.
Yes, we are compliant, but our membership is rapidly losing business because our prices are being significantly undercut. But yes, we are compliant. We remain compliant, but being compliant brings our viability into question.
Right. Let me ask you then. You have what percentage of the government contracts that you know of which have been awarded to your members? Of the government contracts, because the complaint is against, and the allegation is that the government is complicit in these things which are happening. And so I want to ask you,
on a point of order, I'm not too sure. I don't hear them saying that the government is complicit. I'm not hearing that from them.
I am not able to say how many of our members hold government contracts, but what I can say is that from our membership, we have lost a lot of government contracts.
Okay. In any analysis, because your position is that we are, as you put it, in a race to the bottom. So any analysis which is being done must take into consideration the value of the contracts which have been awarded to your membership, the extent to which it goes across the various industries, and how your margins and all that have been impacted. So do you have could we have the benefit of, because I'm concerned about this race to the bottom. I am concerned, really concerned, as you are concerned, if that is in fact happening. But I don't have the benefit of the numbers, because what I see in your statement suggests that there are allegations against two entities, and I take it that those two entities are not members of your organization.
No, they're not.
They're not. All right. And have you, in the last year, had any complaints from any of the guards working with any of your members that they have been underpaid, or either on the basic wage or on the sums paid by way of allowances?
Complaints from our members?
Yes, of any of you.
No, we have not had complaints from our members.
Right. So over what period have you taken the measurements as to where these breaches have occurred? Over what period have you? Because I just want to establish the trend which you say has set in.
The impact of these breaches have come to our attention, and we have been watching it, I would say, for the last 2.5 years.
2.5 years. And what percentage of your business would you say that you lost in year one?
It's hard for me to say what our membership lost, because you must understand that this is a very highly competitive industry. And what we lose and what we gain, we don't often like to talk about.
Lieutenant, I with respect, if we are racing to the bottom, I take it that there's a starting point in year one, and let's take that year one to be the year 2016. So you, in year one, you would have lost, let's say, 10% of the contracts awarded. And what would you say the loss is in year two? Did it run into 20%?
I would probably say that we have lost more than 40% of the tenders out there. And what I would like to do, because it speaks to the situation, the industry measures its ability to perform on what we call ratios. And the ratio of your direct labor cost, which is the cost of the security officer, to what you're billing, what you charge the client per hour, is what makes up the ratio. We are seeing today that there are companies out there that are charging as low as $300 an hour for a security officer, when the minimum wage requires him to pay the officer $286.50 an hour. Coming from that differential, that $13.50, comes insurances, comes supervision, comes licensing, comes all the other things. That is where the industry is today. When a non-compliant company with the minimum wage goes into the market with a $300 rate, and he goes to somebody who is conscious of what is happening and says, I can deliver this service for $300 an hour. They are coming to the reputable companies and saying, guys, if you don't match this, your history. And therefore, the compliant companies are now being forced to compress their rates to try and hold business and hold market share.
But let me ask you, is that how the procurement process works? That when you have a tender out, that you are given, I thought all the persons who are tendering would submit on the same date, but you're suggesting that there's something else happening.
No, the tender process is a standard document that goes out, that requires everything.
Right.
All the paperwork.
So
they are really box-checking exercises. They are really box-checking exercises because at the end of the day, the evaluation.
No, I want to go back to the point
rate.
where you say somebody comes back to you being a member
It's
of.
more in the free market from the rest of the private sector. Government, because you are going through the tender process, you can't go back and solicit because the government is restricted.
That's what I want to clarify.
Government is restricted to tenders.
Yes.
But companies who are not compliant can go to the open market and solicit. And when they solicit with rates that are built on non-compliance, it does harm to the compliance sector of the industry.
I want you to help me with that, because that is something that I believe that we would have to make a recommendation on. You're saying that there's a flaw in the whole tender process, because as I understand it, the package will be put together, and the publications and all requirements, and as you say, is ticking the box as Mr. Overton and his entities, have they complied? And if they haven't complied, you get knocked out, and ultimately, who can perform? But you have this differential, that you say, between what is actually paid to the guard and
the charge rate, the billing rate.
And you have that little differential when and you itemize all the charges which have to be met. Mm-hmm. What is it that your body is less efficient in its deliverables than the entities of which you complain? Why they are able to, or have you considered that there's less efficiency in your body than in the others which you have said are not compliant?
We have contemplated that, and there probably is some of that, but in the real essence, your ability to reinvest, your ability to do everything in the business is not there. And if you even look at it, there are a number of contracts that have been awarded that you see guards going unpaid for months. So in the evaluation, you are asked to submit your financials, and one would think that part of submitting your financials is to see what reserves you have, what working capital you have, those sorts of things. But when you have a company that's operating on a government contract and not being able to pay their guards for months, then there is a problem. There is something wrong.
So you have that information which you can provide this, and you have provided that to the Ministry of Labour?
No, we have not, because, as I said, the guards not being paid is a separate issue that they need to take to the Ministry of Labour.
No, in the same way that their allowances, you've mentioned that the allowances were not paid. So,
as I said, we are able to do that by way, because I'm not going to make an accusation that I don't have documentary evidence in hand to support.
Right.
I am not making accusations in the wild. And people not being paid is what you hear in the media. The officer himself who has not been paid has to make that statement.
Right. So you would want to withdraw that one. So that is just mere hearsay. You have provided us with evidence to suggest that the persons who are underpaid in terms of the allowances.
Correct.
But you do not have, at the minute, anything to suggest that there's a guard or guards who have not been paid for months.
Correct. I have no documentary evidence of that.
All right. So, what did you seek professional assistance in making the determination about this race to the bottom, or is that you have in-house competencies and you have?
I said that was my personal opinion. I preceded it by saying it was my personal opinion and my words.
Those are your words.
Yes.
And that's you have competencies in doing that kind of analysis.
I have worked in this industry for the last 30
Lieutenant
years,
Commander,
and I have been in security for the last 46 years.
No, what I'm asking is about numerical analysis so that you can make that determination, and that's all. It's not...
No, I have no numerical analysis.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Member...
Just a quick question.
Yeah,
just a quick question.
Member Campbell, you have reverted to court.
No, just a quick question in relation to... Chairman, just a quick question to Commander. As Commander said, he has competence, he has been involved in the private security business for a number of years. I'm of the opinion, and I want you to tell me if I'm correct or not, that most of our security companies, and you should know that about probably your company or the members that you're conversant with, are paying single rates to their employees, and they do not pay overtime or holiday rates. And I'm talking now about companies that fall under your umbrella that you know about. Because you see, what I'm concerned about is, as you said, the blanket statement that we are dealing with the lives of thousands of workers, which translates into families. Is it therefore that the company that you have conduct of, or your companies under your umbrella, are you having written to the Ministry of Labor? Have you discussed with them when you're writing, look, are we all paying our overtime? Are we all paying the holiday pay? Or are we all just paying single rate? I want to know, before you wrote to the Ministry of Labor and Security, did you check that? And can you now say to us, because the protection must mean that you are protecting the workers too, are your members paying just single rate? Are your members paying overtime? Are you paying holiday fees as ought to be done? That is, I just want to know, because my concern is, if it is wrong and we have to change the legislation and make amendments, then we'll do it. But we have to understand that since there are private companies that are concerned, are you looking after those workers in the way they ought to have?
Chair, members, the private security industry in Jamaica since the mid-80s has operated on the independent contractor method of engagement. This has been the norm since the mid-80s. The industry practices 12-hour shifts with standard rates, no overtime. On public holidays, officers are paid double time. It is how the industry has been since the mid-80s. There has been a lot of talk about changing, but there has been no true engagement to get a transition from what became necessary in the mid-80s to go to where we may want it today. But the practice that is in place amongst our members and a lot of the industry has been so since the mid-80s.
Thank you, Commander. So it is correct to say, therefore, that since the mid-80s, even our private security companies who have written to the Ministry of Social Security have not been paying overtime, have not been paying holiday rates. And therefore, my point, that's why I wanted the PS to finish her thing. The truth is, Chairman, that we have a situation where government is not complicit. The entire industry has been operating in a way where all the workers have not got what they ought to get. And that is my point. If it is, in fact, that the report, the ministry is allowed to complete the report, and we got a full sum, what we would find is, as members of parliament, we need to do something about it for the workers. We cannot start off, and it is incorrect for us to start off and appear as if private companies are doing all that the workers are to get, but government is being complicit in that. And I'm saying to you, he has answered my question, which is where my concern are, because I too know people who operate and use security companies, and they are private security companies, and they are large private security companies, and we all have constituents who work in them, and they are saying to you, but I don't get overtime, I don't get holiday pay, so this is it. So it is a concern that the entire industry needs to address. And my thing, in law they say, he who comes to equity must come with clean hands. So the fact is that we all need to address the situation.
Thank you. I have Member Daly, Paulwell, and Phillips.
To Lieutenant Overton, I just want to find out this industrial security company inspection report that was done in April 2019. There are remarks and some action that should be taken. I've seen here where I don't see any timeline given, but I see recommendations. I don't know if it is your report.
No. That's the ministry.
That's the ministry.
The ministry has given us a report. They have only made a submission as to issues that exist now.
So the ministry.
I have not, because we've been going and having the discussion. I think we have kind of again. We have not allowed the PS, even in our own right, to make her comments.
Okay, thank you.
So hold on, Member Daly, I don't know if you would allow. Well, complete, and then let me ask the other members if we could allow.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you, Chairman. That's okay.
Yes, members, I think it may be appropriate. PS, we have kind of gone through the discussion, and there's been a lot of discussion taking place. But I think it's important for you to make a few comments.
Yes.
And of course, I will allow you to be as concise or as, in other words, what you feel comfortable with now until you bring your fulsome report.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. I was not afforded the opportunity to introduce my team.
Please do.
To my right, I have Ms. Gillian Corodos, who is the Senior Officer in charge of Industrial Relations and Allied Services. To my left, Ms. Camille Bennett Campbell, Director of Legal Services. And behind me, we have Ms. Simone Mackenzie Mir, the Director of Research Analysis, Ms. Faylene Foster, Director of Pay and Conditions Employment, and Ms. Philippa Parkinson, Senior Labor Officer. Chair, we got the request from the Parliament, the PAAC, and we have been doing our investigations, and I must stress that the report tabled is a very preliminary report. The discussions that have taken place this morning will certainly assist us in looking at some of the areas that are of concern to the members, and that was raised. I want to make it clear that the Ministry of Labour takes the protection and the rights of workers very seriously. And the matter of security guards has been a long-standing issue. Based on our investigation, we did preliminary with 14 companies. And Chairman, I must say that, the matter of resources has come up, and we're not a ministry that have all the resources to do everything that we need to do within the time period. So we have visited a number of companies, and I think based on the discussion and what was said by Mr. Overton, our report certainly validates what he said, where we reported that by and large companies do pay the single rate, but they have not been paying the overtime rate. Some companies do pay the holiday, and the report is there, which speaks to it. Chairman, the ministry, we do get complaints from time to time by individual security guards who come in to our pay and condition branch regarding underpayment or benefits that they have not received. And over the last 6 months, we have had 10 companies or 10 matters currently before the court. So specifically in relation to security guards. So I want to assure the members that when we do get the complaints from the individual security guards, it is a matter that we take seriously and we pursue the matter in court. Based on what we have found, all the companies that we have found that are in breach, we have written to them, highlighting the breaches that they have committed. Our officers will be conducting follow-up inspections to ensure compliance, and where appropriate, we will pursue legal action if the companies continue to be in breach. Chairman, the Commander Overton spoke about from the 1980s, and I think it says to us that what is going on in the industry is not new. And we will be meeting with the members of the industry, with the PSRA, with Commander Overton's organization, and representatives from the companies to hear what are the issues and to see how we as a labor ministry, what we can do within our own machinery or within our own laws to address some of the deficiencies and to ensure that our workers in this sector are not, that they are properly compensated for the work done. Thank you.
Just to say to you, I think that most of us as representatives here, the first position that we are taking when we hear this is we all want to see to the protection of our security guards. Am I correct? And with that, there have been some specific breaches of guidelines that are put in by law. So you have basic minimum wages, the allowances, etc. The things that are mandated by the specific laws. And I think as a first case, very happy that you're going through this process. We're happy that we're going through it now, because as a government, we have to set the example to the rest of the country. And I think that the process you're going through now is going to find that, as you said, there are some breaches already that you've identified. Now, what you're going to be saying to those companies, I understand from what you just said, is that they have to correct it. Now, that is going to be a process, because at the end of the day, there is, in correcting it, a financial component. But I do believe that where we have to go to is you're going to have to indicate to us, and maybe not today, having gone through this complete report, where do you set as your guideline? In other words, these are the things that must be done, because it sends that message to the entire society as a government. And also, we're probably going to need some recommendations, inclusive maybe guidance from the Cabinet Office and the Ministry of Finance as to how we will have to adjust our procurement guidelines so that in future we can capture all these things, because as a basic minimum we have to ensure that those rules and regulations were put in place to protect different sectors of society are in fact followed by government. So I think that's where we want to go, members. There. Member Paul had indicated for some time, and I see Member Jackson. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to address two matters. Firstly, in relation to the broad concerns that I heard earlier, I think persons in our society are not aware of the Fair Competition Act. And we were deliberate in enabling individuals to have their own private right of action. So if you are alleging that there are agreements that affect competition, that prejudice your business, all of those can be brought before a tribunal. And lawyers don't advertise, so I will not say that I'm a lawyer who do these cases.
Member Campbell, and
I will not say that.
You hear the caveat that Member Paulwell has put.
Yes. And also, a private individual can take action against a government in the same regard. For breaches, in very much the same way that you can challenge for constitutional issues. So I just want to remind this country that there is that important body of legislation that they can rely on to provide redress. I think, Chairman, in relation to an immediate step that can be taken based on this committee's recommendation, insofar as procurement is concerned, is for an insistence that the laws of Jamaica are observed by those persons who are seeking to achieve government contracts. And one such law is the minimum wage law. And if you bid falsely in that regard, then those contracts ought to be terminated. So I think that should be inserted immediately. I think this issue of fairness to workers must be seen as our priority as a committee. And that coming from this sitting and what we have heard today, a specific recommendation be sent to the Ministry of Finance or the Cabinet Office to say that we recommend that in relation to awards of contracts, just as how you have to get a tax compliance certificate, we must be assured that your workers are being paid the minimum wage in relation to that sector. I think we need to leave this room with that as a clear recommendation. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I've heard your comments about the course of action following and that of my colleague from East Kingston just now. I read a letter from the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security, and it cited an example to demonstrate the gravity of the breach as it relates to the security guard, the worker, not the procedural breach, not even the breach of the law in of itself, which would constitute an offense. But it cites here, and I read, in one case, I won't call a particular case, company, being paid, NC security officers are cheated $5,280 per fortnight, or $137,280 per annum. That's the material injury. The recommendation space I want is that all of these companies who have been in breach, the amount that the workers were denied be paid forthwith, retroactively. And indeed, some sort of interest should be paid to them for the injury that they have suffered, for this loss of income that is due to them by the laws that we pass in this parliament to protect them. It can't be the case that we just acknowledge the breach, serve them a letter, right? They go on making all the millions of dollars they make from the contract. Their life goes on as usual, but yet the workers who provided the source of income for those companies remain injured. It cannot be fair, Mr. Chairman, and we must, as a committee and as a parliament, ensure it happens without any delay. Not something to be settled 2 months down the road, 1 year down the road. And that's why those workers and other Jamaicans like them feel that the system is not for them. It's for the big man. We are here to protect them, Mr. Chairman, and that must be one of the recommendations that we put forward.
Through you to the PS. You spoke to the fact that letters have been sent out to those companies that are in breach, but is there a timeline that they would have to respond? And do you not have the power as the Ministry of Labor to give them a cease and desist authority that they cannot continue to practice unless they correct these breaches?
I don't have the power of cease and desist for the companies. That's the short answer. But we wrote to the companies. We outlined the various breaches that we were able to identify, the officers were able to identify. We actually, in our communication, advised the companies that the breaches must be corrected immediately. And remember, no timeline was given to them because we believe that the correction must be done immediately. If we were to give the company a timeline of 2 weeks' time, then I would be facilitating a breach. So our communication to them was that it must be corrected immediately. We will be doing follow-up inspections with the companies to determine whether or not they have in fact started paying the appropriate rates.
You're saying that they are compliant since you sent all these letters. Are you seeing where the majority of them have been compliant? Are they responding to these breaches?
Our officers went out in the field on the 4th of April. And as we speak, they're still in the field. So it is an ongoing process. Letters started going out as of Monday of this week. So we have not had an opportunity to re-inspect.
PS, through you, Mr. Chairman. No,
Oh, all right, sorry, I thought you had.
The chairman said Stuart Campbell, and but if
No,
friend,
go ahead. No.
Right.
I had not stopped you.
Well, PS, you indicated that you have 10 companies before the court presently. Are those 10 breaches which you have before the court relating to the 2 entities of which you have received the complaints?
No, not currently.
So did you determine whether any of those 10 are members of the Jamaica Society for Industrial Society?
No, I did not determine.
And may I just
However, they're...
May I just ask you why?
You asked me what, sir?
May I just ask you why you didn't determine?
Well, remember, we were looking at the task before us from the Parliament was to look at those entities that government has engaged. And so we were looking at government.
Okay, so the two for which you have received a complaint, do any of those have government contracts?
Yes.
So why didn't you have a look at them? You said the request from the PAAC is to look at the entities for which you had received complaints, but it seems not to be the case.
Well, unless I'm misunderstanding your question, but the question before was in relation to the two entities. First, you asked me whether or not the companies on my list that I have before, where we're pursuing matters in court with them, whether or not they're registered with the Society for Industrial Guards.
Let me just cut out the confusion which evidently I created. All right? And let us go back. You have 10 entities before the court. Did the PAAC ask you to inquire into the operations of these 10 entities?
Not specifically.
Okay. Did the PAAC ask you to inquire into the two entities referred to by Lieutenant Commander I'm sorry, Jamaica Society for Industrial Society?
Yes, let me just say what our request was broad. We simply said that there had been a complaint about security guards not receiving all the remuneration that they should under the law, and we simply asked the Ministry of Labour to look at the security companies that had been contracted by government to ensure that all the rules and regulations set by government are being followed.
And so, hence the question I asked as to whether the two have any contracts with the government. Yeah. So yes, could you just tell us exactly what is your finding in relation to the breaches which they committed?
The two specific companies in relation, I just want to ensure that I'm clear with what you're asking.
All right.
All right. The two companies.
We have complaints in relation to these companies. Tell us, what are the breaches that you found in your investigation?
Well, one of the companies, we are still investigating that company. The other company, they pay the single rate, but they do not pay the overtime rates or the holiday rate. That particular company also pays the laundry allowance up to 40 hours and not for the full number of hours that a security guard may have worked for a week.
All right. And what is the regulation that you have set out that should apply? Is it that they should pay the overtime and pay the laundry allowance and
yes.
all?
So the law provides for a 40-hour work week. Hours worked in excess of a 40-hour work week should be, the individuals should be paid at time and a half in excess of 40 hours. The law also provides that if a worker works on a public holiday, that they are to be paid double time. If a worker works on their rest day, because the law provides that every worker should have at least 1 day in each week as a rest day, then, and if that worker has to, for whatever reason, give up their rest day to come into work, then they need to be compensated at double time. For the other allowances, they are paid at the hourly rate. However, the other allowances, if you work in excess of the 40 hours, it's not time and a half. It's only the base pay. So if you work 60 hours, for example, and the allowance is $44, you are paid 60 times 44. Whereas for the single rate, you get paid the single rate for 40 hours, and then the remaining 20 hours, you're paid time and a half.
All right. Yes. So in relation to Company 1, the analysis done by the Jamaican Society for Industrial Society says that the worker he loses an annual sum of $73,000. Is that your finding? Yeah. In relation to Company 1, it gives us the figure.
Member, I wouldn't want you to hold me to that calculation, because what we did was to look at the pay records for the companies and to see what they pay vis-a-vis what they ought to have paid. So we did not go through to say individually what that worker has lost in a year.
But P.S., you had guidance. You had specific guidance from the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security, which speaks to a specific employer or employees. Would it not been a good practice then to go and look at this specific case and to interview this specific worker to determine whether or not there's any truth to which is contained? Because we don't have any certification, and so we take it. There's just this assumption that it is in fact true. And did you take any steps to verify the information as contained in this paper writing?
You mean for this for the actual pay slip that was provided?
Yes.
Remember, I told you that our investigation is still not yet complete.
No,
so for that particular instance...
But I would have thought that this is so preliminary that you have a specific complaint. You have the evidence before you. Did you go to this named person? This person is named in the document as having been deprived of a certain sum. Yes. So did you make any attempt to check this? Yes. And to determine whether this is replicated right across the entity? Because I would have thought that, you know, it's the complaint which you have, yes, starting out from the Jamaica Society for Industrial Security, is against these two entities, right? And yes, I understand your investigation is continuing, but at the start of your investigation, you would say, yes, we have a complaint from Mr. XYZ, you know, and it would help you to move from stage 1 to stage 2. So the answer to that is that you didn't do it.
No, that's not the answer. The answer to it is that we do not have a complaint from the individual worker. We have a request from the Parliament, which we were acting upon. We are looking at everything overall with respect to the company. When our officers went to that particular company, the breach is not only with that particular person, the breach is with other workers employed by the company. And so the company has a requirement to ensure that they fulfill and meet the expectation under the law. So we have gone beyond that individual. We have looked at the company's record.
So you did do an investigation in relation to this particular one?
In relation to the company, yes, and I did
Yes.
say that, yes.
Oh, so yes.
So you were talking about the specific pay slip, meaning the specific worker. That was
Yes,
how.
yes.
But we did go to the company and look at their pay records.
So, and you were prompted by this one. We have 2 pages and a 3rd page with. I don't want to name the individuals because this is prejudice.
And we didn't have a complaint from the individual.
Nothing. So, that's the 73,000 in relation to the $137,000 in case number 2. How far did your investigations take you in relation to that one?
We are still in the process of investigating that particular company.
Member Campbell, let me just say, you had earlier advocated for me not to press the PS until the report was finalized. And I noticed, please, just hear me out. I'm just saying I would ask you to heed your own concerns.
Chairman, I did say that insofar as the matter will proceed, insofar as we'll allow
So you're comfortable. So you're comfortable now.
And we will carry out our investigation in relation to the 2. I have not gone outside of those parameters.
No. Member Campbell.
So to say, Chairman, that I should be guided by my own considerations.
Yes,
but so. Chairman, and I'll ask you. Please. I'll just ask you, because to allow me in relation to the second case, that to put this question as to whether you're determined, and I believe the answer is that the investigation is still continuing. All right. So, yes, we have breaches in relation to 1 and 2, but you can't say the extent of the breach. Let me now ask, what is it that the ministry is empowered to do in relation, once it's discovered that these sums are owing to individuals who are working as security officers? What is it that it is empowered to do?
Chairman, can I ask my legal officer to assist in that particular response?
Absolutely.
Yes, good afternoon, committee members. If we have the cooperation of the worker, we can use the civil jurisdiction of the RM court to recover the sums due, and we would issue a letter to the worker. But we also have the power under Section 5 of the Minimum Wage Act to actually pursue criminal proceedings before the parish court where it has been determined that a person has been paid below the minimum wage. And so the penalty for that is, on conviction, $100,000 for each offense. So that's in relation to being underpaid. In addition to that, the court can be asked to also pay to the worker, make an order, if the person is convicted as the employer, that the worker be paid the sums that should have been paid.
This conviction applies to the directors of all the entities which are found to be in breach.
Yes, in relation to the company, and if they have agents and so, then also.
Right.
Yes.
Let me now ask, have you, in relation to those 10 that you have before the court, that is the civil court, do you have a corresponding criminal prosecution going against those entities?
At this time, no.
And is there any particular reason why you have not pursued that approach?
No, at this point, I guess in those cases they had the cooperation of the workers, so they would have been using the civil. Labor officers are actually authorized to institute these proceedings also on behalf of the ministry. But I think our measure going forward, we are going to be utilizing our criminal sanctions a lot. In terms of to ensure enforcement. Where we have the case, where you have enough to prove the case.
So.
All right, I have member, ladies here.
And I think Comrade Stewart asked, Member Stewart asked some of the questions, but just to find out from you, do you have adequate amount of inspectors to go around based on the urgency of the list that you have here with you? Because you're saying that there is no timeline because it is supposed to be done now. And if that is so, when would we be expected to get from you a report saying that all of this has been ventilated?
We do not have enough inspectors current, and we would also require additional support, certainly from our legal standpoint, to be in a position to pursue criminal proceedings.
All right. Okay, Member Phillips.
Chair, just a couple of members touched in the area that I wanted to just mention, because, you know, when it comes to government contracts, I think we have a responsibility, and the issue of the breaches in this instance, and I would hope that for all government entities and those companies that are in contract with government, that we can finish this report in short order, but that immediately that these companies become compliant in paying the proper rates that ought to be paid, and right across the board, the sick leave, the vacation leave. Otherwise, there should be some sanction for these companies. But also, Chairman, I would love to see coming out of this committee, and I think that the Ministry of Finance ought to be called to the committee itself, and the Ministry of Labor, in seeing how it is that we make recommendations, strong recommendations coming from the committee, in giving the Ministry of Labor the teeth to ensure that these breaches are never repeated, but also that when the procurements are being done, government getting into contracts with security companies, that it's not only just the NCC and the TCC that is checked, but also that is it that we make the Private Security Regulation Authority give it more teeth itself, that they ensure that the security companies comply with everything else before the cabinet sign off on these contracts. Because when we sit here in Parliament and we see the cabinet submissions come, these are hundreds of millions of dollars over a 3 or a 4 year period or 2 year period that these contracts are done. And if it is that we are paying out taxpayers' money, then there ought to be compliance with these companies. And when you look at you know, and when I look at it, Chairman, do we look at companies that are getting into construction contracts? Because you're talking about the bottom of the table, the laborers. Yeah. So do we look at that category of workers when we are getting into contracts? Because they're one thing, we see it with some other contracts with other companies, their laborers are complaining of being paid below certain rates, So I think it is something to look at, Chairman, and making some recommendations and not just making recommendations that we table in the House, but an actual debate. If it is that we make recommendation that a subcommittee of the House itself look at these issues. But I think it is something worth looking at. You're talking about 22,000 workers. This is not something to just say that we mention it in here by passing and let it be. All right, so that's my recommendation to the Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, members, a number of issues have been raised today. I think out of this sort of preliminary meeting, PS, the first thing is that I understand from you that you have written to all the security companies engaged in government, asking them to correct immediately whatever to the default position that you would have as or what is your default position laid out by government. Am I correct?
We have written to all those who we have identified to be in breach that we have visited so far.
And you will do all. All right, and certainly you can tell us. You can send to us what is the default position that you are holding them to. That's number one. Number two, point was made that in looking at the contracts that now exist, that certainly where there are glaring breaches, obvious breaches, that you will make a recommendation to us. You could probably seek advice on us looking to make that retroactive for those workers who have been involved. I think all members on both sides sort of, I notice a general nodding as we are going along. And thirdly, I do know that at the beginning some members had indicated they may want to see some of the companies. I don't know. I'm just going by the recommendations that have been put out as we went along. The fourth point is there obviously is going to have to be a review of the process of procurement so that the loopholes, rather than being filled or being recognized after, are explicitly explained in the procurement so that there's a level playing field and that everyone knows exactly what the position is and we'll get the true cost of that and that the workers will then get the proper and true compensation. We would like some advice on that as well. Members, what I would suggest, this thing has been on the table for some time. It's going to take you some time to go through the all the details. We are now in the third week. I would suggest, Member Phillips, I will not be here next week, but certainly if we can get any more information, especially on some of those recommendations, I don't necessarily feel that the ministry has to come next week, but certainly if we can get some of the documentations, members may be able next week before the deliberations with the Ministry of Finance, which may be an appropriate time to have some discussion, indicate some more suggestions as to how to go forth. So I suggest a review next week by the committee.
But Chair, since the Ministry is coming, Ministry of Finance is coming next week, maybe short notice, but if they could, or if we could get any section of the procurement guidelines that have to do with security companies, so that we can look at it also to see.
Not to cut you, but just to say, Member Phillips, that I find attractive the concept of us not just looking at security guards, but the wider issue of employment, contract employment in government.
In government.
Now, if it is an area where, and I noticed recent pronouncements, that we are moving away for, it's something for us to look at. And I would seek, if you are going to have that discussion,
in support,
to have a look at the areas. But as I said, it's a discussion that could be had with the Ministry of Finance when they come, and I think that a follow-up of this issue so that the committee can get an idea of how it's going to proceed, with
because
the understanding that we have already indicated that sometime in the relatively near future we'll be seeing the Ministry of Labor in its wider scope, so you can make the determination next week how you intend to, or how we would proceed from there.
Because I'm more interested right now in how these breaches are corrected.
Exactly. So that, and hence why next week there's some follow-up on it. Members, I don't know if anybody has anything else they'd like to say. Let me, on behalf of members, let me thank Lieutenant, is it Lieutenant Colonel or Lieutenant Colonel? What?
Lieutenant Commander.
Lieutenant Commander Overton and Mr. Mahfoud, his team. Thank you for coming. I think that what we have gotten is a very interesting discussion that has begun, and I think that it gives us an opportunity to look at an area that I think we all feel quite passionately about, and that we need to ensure that protections are in place. P.S., let me thank you and your team for coming. There's some follow-up, and the clerk will be in touch with you.
I just noticed that it is all women, and coming from the Ministry of Labor.
Excellent.
A good look.
All right. Okay, so members, with that, yes, and to my members, I wish you all a holy Easter, and that we will. You would like some bun? I'm not certain, but yeah. So members, thank you, and the meeting is now adjourned till next week Wednesday at 10 o'clock.
What can a little germs do?